All right, so let's take a look at what we're starting with here. Very, very rotten. So I'm just gonna kind of come in here and assess my plan of attack before I get started. Let's see, I'll come under here to show this rot better. Now, not all of this in here, you know, is super rotten. And this is definitely stamped a lot nicer than the new ones. So I'm gonna take my time here and compare the new ones to these originals. I've got my square tubing over here, piled up here. I'm gonna come over here and weld that in. I'm just gonna, before I weld it in, have it in my way. Just gonna compare the two, figure out what I wanna change. I may graft this piece into the new one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I got going on. So I'm gonna confirm that. And then I'm gonna take square tubing and go straight from right here, just on the inside here. We'll weld it to that, bring it back over, butt it up against here, weld it here. And then I'm gonna do the top one and kind of come down at an angle. So I'll have straight across and then one coming down at an angle, be a good strong brace. Obviously this is all braced up here, and I'm only gonna do one channel at a time. I will go ahead once I've got this all figured out. When I weld this side in, I'm gonna go over and brace the other side. That will also, by putting it on the inside here, I'll be able to mount the door if I wanted to, because right now the door gaps are perfectly fine. So, all right, let me dig out these nice new channels and figure out my game plan. This is definitely not one of those processes where you just want to jump in feet first and just start getting after it and be like, oh, it'll be fine. When you're dealing with this much aftermarket and a very early car, that's just nothing but problems. Okay, so here's what we got. This heater channel, waited months and months and months for it to be made overseas. I'm not gonna throw the name out there. You can find out because there's only a couple people that make them anyway. I can't remember. A lot of this stuff, it doesn't matter who it comes from because it's just what's available. This outer rocker, this lower quarter, for sure, those came from M&T Manufacturing. I am a lot happier with this outer rocker by far than I am with this heater channel. And that came here in just a few days. And those guys, you know, they're on top of it, and they will tell you straight up before you buy from them. If you call them on the phone, they will tell you, you know, this isn't going to fit that great, but that's all that's out there. Or they'll say, this is really good, or don't buy that, it's not even going to work, you'd be better off making it from scratch. You know, that's the kind of people they are. So that is extremely hard to find. Highly recommend them. But anyway, this is the best of what's out there for sale, other than making it from scratch. So here's what we got. All right, this, I'll just start here. So this lower quarter, obviously you can see where I'd cut it out. This is where the patch was over before. You can see a little bit of rot right here. But other than that, it's good. Okay? Now, the issue here is that I have to get in behind this and address all of that. Okay? So, looking at it in here, you can see if this was out of my way, I'd have a lot of room in here. All right, so this is what I mean by taking one step at a time. I take my new panel, which is huge, right? It goes way above all of this mess up here. So you'd go, oh, fine. You know, do the easiest thing and you go, oh, we'll just slice it off up there and you don't have to fill this, and there's a dent here and then you don't have to deal with that. And you just have one weld there, roll over the seam, do one at the bottom, but that's not gonna work for a couple of reasons. One, try to do this with holding the phone. This body line curve does not match up well. The other thing is where they've rolled it at the bottom and put the flange on it. You see how I'm right there at the top? Look at the bottom. That is way off. Now granted, it's gonna roll and do all that. However, if I roll it up and I touch it here, look how short I'm gonna be. So, this portion of the curve here is not really the same, where they bring the flange out at the bottom. The other one comes out about this far, which is fine. It's okay to have some extra, you know, I can just grind that back and make it look like this. Not a problem. However, the further we start getting up into here, the panels don't match. These carbon Ghias, if you've ever put trim on them, it's a pain in the butt. Those clips aren't that great, and the trim, you know, I mean, any thickness you build up in here is really gonna give you trouble. So you wanna keep this as thin as I can. So what I'm gonna do, this is kind of the long and short of it, for now anyway. I am only gonna come in here and open up what I have to, and I'm gonna leave as much of this edge as I can. This will just have to go away because I'm replacing this anyway with this. And you can see this has the extra material here to where those two are gonna butt up. So I'll do what I have to there. So with this panel, I'm just gonna open it up what I absolutely have to. And if I end up having to go bigger, I do, but that will allow me, so if I only have to use this much of this panel, I can adjust a little better, you know what I'm saying? So if I have to move this over, I have to kick it some, but I'm only having to come over here, then I have all this extra material here that I can compensate for it, versus if I just go all the way like this. You see how fat this lip is? Where you should be able to roll it over? Well, look how thin it gets down here. There ain't no way you're rolling it over into there when it's already looking like it's gonna come up too short. So there's all kinds of possibilities. There's different ways you can come at it. This is just how I'm gonna do it. Other people do it different, that's fine. So open this up so I can get in here. Now, I've got a little bit of rot right down there. So I bought this panel because, as this car's already shown, the more you dig in, the more problems there's gonna be. You know, this metal seems like it's perfectly fine. I may go to touch it with a welder and it's just gone. So here's the next panel. Again, this is what's out there, right? You can see just from looking at the two stampings, it's not exactly the same. So I'm trying to just use what I have to. Obviously the lower portion of this is rotted out, it's gone. So here again, I need this out of my way to get in here to address that. And then we come to the heater channel. I have not been happy with these heater channels since the day they got here. For how long it took and the money that was spent on them, very, very disappointed. I mean, it's just not great. And then the top, they didn't spot weld these two together. Just every so often, they run a little bead. And then you're gonna have to grind that down when you take your outer rocker and go lay it over and do all that. And it is definitely not gonna look like this. This car being as old as it is, as rare as it is, and going to the lengths we are with this car, it needs to be as correct as possible. Just like those headlight buckets. You know, it's got the one drain hole. That was extra time and effort to fill in those three and then relocate that one. You know, if this was just daily driver or the car wasn't really worth anything like it used to be, then the other buckets, slap them in there, call it a day, it's fine. but that is not what we're dealing with anymore. So you got to take some extra steps and do some more work to get the same result. So on here, you can see where it was in a middle break, and they just kind of kept rolling it. And you can see all along this edge where they had welded this panel to all of this, right? Then you get down here to this big gaping hole where this tube is supposed to come in. So just keep up with me here. I know it's a lot, but I'm gonna have to come in here and I'm gonna have to weld some of this up and patch it up just to make this fit, because there ain't no way that that's correct, right? So these things are just starting to pile up now with this new heater channel. Also, they welded in this reinforcement. This car, I've checked both sides. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. And then, is that gonna get in the way? You know, we gotta put this thing back together, which it's not even, I mean, just look at this. Like I said, I am just disappointed with this. All right, so here's what I'm planning to do. All of this under here is fine till you get, let's see, if I look right here. So this right here, where you can see a little bit of rot, is this junction right here. Just that. Now, what I'm planning on doing, and I know the guy that owns this car, I'd mentioned it before and he wasn't thrilled about it, but you gotta do what you gotta do. This is donor metal to me now. I'm gonna cut out what I have to out of this to repair this original stuff. I'm not gonna cut the whole thing out and put this whole garbage piece in here. So, if you look in here, all this I'd opened up previously from patches and stuff and let the sandblaster get in here and see what we were working with, because at that time, and probably still today, just trying to find channels is good luck pretty much. So I didn't want to cut up anything that I may regret later. So you see in here, this is all just nice, clean, solid steel. Behind here, it's all good till you get back here. So basically, I am going to, this is all outer rocker under here. It's another thing about karman Ghias versus like Beetles. This job is 10 times harder on this karman Ghia than it is a Beetle doing any of this, because of the layers. As well as, you know, obviously nothing really unbolts like fenders and, you know, all that stuff. On the Beetles they do. So anyway, you got to get in here. So I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna have to open this up. I'm gonna leave this, just trying to keep all my locations that have to be, you know, set back to original. And again, not going any higher than I have to. They've worked in here a little bit, but I can body work it back. But that'll give me access, so I can get in here and get this outer rocker off, because I am going to use this entire outer rocker. There's no question. The only thing that I'm possibly gonna do, and I'll know more once I get into it, but all of this here is very likely, because you can see that this was a piece and this is a piece, and again, we're trying to keep this thing as original looking as possible. I may just come back and trim that top lip, you know, that would come all the way back here, trim it back to here, and then lay it over, plug weld it in, so that everything here looks exactly the way it was from the factory, and then just slide it under here and so on. So moving on, this is good, that's junk, that's kind of junk. Kind of in the middle. This piece, now you can see from the lighting hitting on it that I'll be body working it. I'm not gonna go up any higher again than I have to. So like you see here, I got this black Sharpie line. That's where I'm trimming that. That's where I'm gonna put this panel back in. I'm not gonna come up into here, then I'm messing with all this stamping and all that mess. This panel is pretty close. And it's thicker, you know? Some of this stuff is paper thin. This is a good, heavy, thick piece. But for comparison, look at the stamping. You can see down here. So when I go to match all this up, I gotta come back here and try to make sure that this is lined up. I gotta pay attention to the curves at the back, even though I'm gonna end up doing all of this wheel arch. That's a whole nother ball game we'll get to later. But this one, as far as under here lining up, looks better, and so on. And then I've got plenty of lip up here to work with getting into this. So now you can see what I've got to work with here as far as my new metal, and I'm kind of showing you why I'm gonna go the way I am. Slide under here, show a good view of the back. So right here, you can see it gets real nasty. But see too, you know, that pipe just comes straight in. I would have to come in and try to fix all that to make it original like. This is just a lot better way to go. So, you know, I showed you how on here, this is kind of, so now we're looking at the same. You can see they already just welded this back together anyway. So essentially, I'm gonna do pretty much the same thing. Just come along this edge, and then I'm gonna drop it down and do all this. All right, so here you can see I welded in a piece of like 1-inch square tubing, welded it back there, welded in up here and at the bottom. And I've come under here, and you can see that I removed the rest of the outer rocker, the whole lower lip. I just took the little 3-inch here with 36 grit disc on it, and basically just ground off the lip from the outer layer. Got it back down to this one. This section here just has very minor pitting, nothing wrong with it at all. Here, this is the inner, what we're gonna call it. So this outer part was heavily pitted in here, so it had to go. So you can see I've stepped it here and brought it all the way back. And then here I have an angle cut on it. Basically, any kind of structural stuff, you want to stagger all your joints. That's what makes it strong. You don't want to line up like seam, then another seam. You know, just like if you were doing a frame, like a frame rail, you do like a Z cut in it. You know, you got to just spread the load out so all the stress isn't just in one area, because then it'll crack and do all that bad stuff you don't want. Anyway, so this is going to be the outer rocker here, and I just went ahead and cleaned it up, left this lip here so I can figure out when I get to that point how exactly am I going to attack it. I've cleaned all this up and cut out all of my bad metal here. I did, this is like the lower piece, so you can see the two body mounting inserts here. I did measure the distance between the two of these before I cut it out, just to make sure that it was the same on the new one here, and believe it or not, they actually are. That's rare. So now I just kind of clean everything up, getting it all ready so that I can start marking, measuring, and cutting out what of this that I need to put back up in here. And I have more wrought in here, you can see. So I have this piece, and you can see they didn't even weld the corners when they folded it over. They just left that for whoever was installing it, that's fine. So now I'm gonna come back up here and continue on and remove this outer skin here, and then see on the inside where exactly do I have to go, because I'm trying, for the most part, obviously I have a little rot here, so I'd step it up right there. And I'm gonna trim this back all the way to the wall, or this next panel, however you wanna refer to it. But I'm just gonna replace what I have to as soon as I get to good steel. If it's right here, I'm just gonna cut it straight across. If I gotta come up here, I'll cut it there. You would think I would want to just come in here and come up to the factory seam and put the whole panel in. Well, if things were made like factory, then absolutely. These, obviously, not at all. So, I'm gonna do the bare minimum on that. This is like real heavy tar stuff, so I'm gonna have to scrape all that out, make sure there's not some hidden rot behind here. But anyway, I don't want to bore everyone with a bunch of grinding. I mean, you've seen tons of grinding and cutting, whatever. So if it was really worth it, I'd film that. But I'm going to go ahead and just off camera, get this all prepped out, see what it's like, and then I'll bring you back. So now you can see that it has definitely escalated since I was last on here, but this is just the way it goes. The rot, I'm looking for these sections over here. This section here, I got it upside down, was right here. Now, I tried to just stay down here and stay on my line, but you can probably see right there, still rotten. Then the lip, I had ground off the extra flange, you know, for the top layer over. But as soon as I did that, this was still just paper thin from rust, and I just pretty much flicked it off with my finger. And I didn't burn through and then hit it. It was rotten. So then I was like, well, now we got to keep going. We got to find good metal, right? And kind of like how I got these little windows cut out here for where they were rotting through, so this blaster could get in there and see how bad it was going to be. I have the inner wheel lip to go around, but again, I'm not going to do any more than I have to. Especially if you really had to go in here and do like wheel tub and then all that other stuff, and you might as well just cut this whole quarter off and get in there and do it and put the whole quarter back on. That'd be easier than coming out here and dealing with all the warpage and laying that bead, and yeah. But we don't have to do that. So what I've got going here is this lip here. I have the section. So this, you can see where it's stamped, where this overlays this, right? So since I was already gonna have to go in there, I could go ahead and cut it all the way up to that. And then I'm just gonna come back and line this up because I have to get up to the good metal. So I'm gonna end up coming right in here about halfway between this edge and this, coming over and probably come down and then go right on this crown here and cut this one kind of like how it's cut. And then the very bottom of it, where it comes in here, and take it across. So that's the next step. Just remember, when you're doing this kind of stuff, it's always way more than what you think it's gonna be. And this is why a lot of these cars don't get brought back to life, because this is extremely labor intensive and expensive. And, you know, project cars, unless you're doing them yourself, it's cheaper to buy one that's done than to have one build it for you. The only difference is you'll know what you have at the end versus you're hoping you have what you bought. Anyway, when I start really getting in here, then I'll set it up on the tripod and show you guys the more technical stuff. But this other, I'm kind of just winging it as I go and trying to find out, you know, where I'm going to end up. So I don't want to keep just changing them, you know, I go and then shoot, now I got to go here and then I trim a little more and so on. So, all right, I'll bring it back when we're ready to weld this chunk back in. All right, so here's what I've got to work with currently. You can see my step here, seam all along. I have, looking at it this way, I have all of this section level with all of this where the body bolts up to. I'll tweak it a little bit as I go because the gaps are, you know, slightly off and the metal's curved, you know, it's in and out a little bit, but that's okay. I'll just tack it and line it all up perfectly. Now, when I cut the original, I cut it from the bottom side because I wanted this, you can see with the shadowing how much is left over the lip, a little less back here to where I had to cut. Now, with that, trying to get up under here so you can see, roll the phone. See towards the back here, there's a gap. Now, there's not one up here, and that's just because when they made this panel, they made it really close to the nut here and not here. So that was their manufacturing. That has nothing to do with anything else. So I will go ahead and address this. It probably looks a little bigger on here than what it really is. I'll be able to pull the two together, weld it up, it'll be just fine. So yeah, I got the step cut. You can see this is kind of sitting inside of there. It makes the gap look a little bigger than what it is. These gaps are pretty dang tight. You don't want them perfectly tight because you want to be able to let the weld get in there. So now we come on the outside. All right, so we'll come back out here, and this is just a loose mock-up because this is actually really tight, not that big of a gap. Same here. This is just a loose mock-up because I was inside tweaking it and trying to get it lined up and all that. So I got my rear corner piece all cut. Trying to do this and look through the camera. I have it ready to go pretty much, but I needed to weld this one in first so that I could basically plug weld this flange to this. I'll do the same thing up here on the flange on the inside, and then once I get this all coated, I'll be able to spray through here before I cap it and put some rust preventative in here. But it's looking pretty dang good, and obviously much better than if I would have just cut the whole thing out. So now I'm going to start tacking it in, getting it all lined up perfectly, and then I'll get it fully welded. All right, so here you can see I'm getting it going in there. I went ahead and took my spot welder and spot welded these. Then I'll come back where I drilled the old spot welds out, and I'll plug weld those, grind them off. But you can see it's all lined up nice and tight there. And then underneath, I started getting it welded all the way down. So at the end, I just have that gap right there. The rest of it's tight. I still have to finish welding all of it. But yeah, it's fitting really nice. So it's working out pretty well considering what I had to work with here. All right, you can see it's fully welded in, plug welded and spot welded down here. The only thing I'm gonna grind is just the lower lip where like the spot welds, plug welds are for the outer rocker to come over and attach to that. I am gonna hold off on putting this section in until I get the outer rocker welded in here. That way I can plug weld the flange and make sure that these two are lined up exactly the way they need to be. So now I'm gonna come back up to this mess, which I was gonna start here originally, but there's so many different layers here and stuff. I wanted to tackle that first, make sure, you know, how everything was gonna go, and just kind of get that knocked out so that I could figure out any snags or anything that I may run into back there before I get into this, because this to me is far more complicated than that right there. So a lot of it's going to be exactly the same way with the staggering the joints. I'm going to come back in here, maybe on this side of it, use this as a, you know, lineup reference point and everything. But anyway, slice this open, come across the top here, and then do the inner and outer where it's rotted back, and then, you know, obviously step back in here just like I did that. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out, but On this car, this is the lower door jamb section, like the lower A-pillar. Now, you can see what's left of almost the same exact shape coming down here, and then it had a piece coming off of it where it kind of capped this off, and this is the outer rocker skin where this panel laid over the top. So this obviously will come in when I do all of that, but I'm gonna have to fabricate this and this, but I believe I can get away with using this section, the new one, and bringing it down in here. It'll have that curve and shape and everything. Okay, so here's the new lower A-pillar section that I cut off what I was gonna need. So now, the next thing I'm gonna do, bring it over here, and you kind of see, you know, you got this lip left here, similar to this lip here where it was spot welded in, and how I have this rock going all the way up here. Now, this piece, I'm just gonna set it over it. I come down like that. This contour, you can kind of see where I've scribed right there, that rounded corner. I don't have any more hands to show, but you can see it. So I'm gonna cut that rounded corner off so I can basically start fitting it in like this. And then from there, I will trim the top of this back to go across here because the rot does go up at the edge here. So, okay, so after some trimming, you can see I removed all this crusty stuff here because I didn't need it as reference anymore. Here's what I ended up with left over out of that piece. Now this is just roughed in. You know, it's not my final fitment or, you know, detail, so, but check that out. Got it curved all the way up and around and all the way over and fitting flat. And that's basically ready to weld in. I'll do a little bit of fine tuning, but that worked out fantastic. All right, so now this piece obviously I won't need until I finish all the rest of this. So the next step I'm gonna do is start cutting out this inner rocker section, the outer rocker where I have to get all this opened up, and then I can start taking my measurements and cut my new one. Okay, so now I'm just about ready to start welding this up. You can see where this is all rotted out, and I've kind of busted out the loose stuff. And then I got this, I'm gonna clean up these edges a little bit so the panel will lay on there nice. But other than that, I pretty much have everything else trimmed out of the way I need it to be. And you can see how I came at an angle here again, and then I'll go all the way, step it down, step it back, step it up, and so on, and drop it down here again and come up and across like so. So all the joints will be staggered and such. So here's what I ended up with out of the new panel. This is how much of it I used, and again you can see where I drilled out the spot welds for that piece. And then I basically cut it over here. I left a little bit of this where they had rolled it, which again, you know, it just like this, you know, just doing a wave. One issue with this that I guess I didn't notice at first, probably should have, is kind of difficult when you're, you know, putting the piece in, trying to get it to fit and sliding it in and whatever, but you see how this is raised here? Well, it kicks down, and this is where they'd put that piece of crap angle iron junk in here that even their spot welds weren't really holding. Anyway, remove that obviously, but this is flat, this is kicked out, and the one on the car is kind of kicked at an angle. It wasn't like that at the rear, everything lined up just perfect, but the front, that step in it, as you can see, it's a 90 degree, and that's not, but I'll get it straightened out, it's not a big deal. And then across here you can see my cuts And then basically right where this curve was, I just took it down to the edge where it's basically just flat, kicked it across, left my flange, ground off the old section of flange till it was, you know, where it would meet up. What I'm down to from that entire lower A-pillar section. So this, I'm trying to get this up here. You can see how I've got, trying to film it and do it all at the same time here. But essentially, there you go. Got it curved around, fitted all the way up and across, fits flat, and then I'll be able to bring this over to the outer rocker, just like they had done from the factory. So I'll weld this in after I get the rest of it, and it'll be back to the original way. Okay, so you can see this is all fully welded in. Ground this all back right here. Went along the seam here, got the bottom, did the bottom down there, so that's all prepped for the outer rocker. So now I've got this piece finalized. I did a little more trimming on it, got my holes drilled out to plug weld. So this is what I've got here. Fits in there nice and tight. And then I'll just kind of hammer this in a little bit as I go, pull it in really good. But yeah, it's gonna work out really well. All right, so here it is, everything all trimmed out, ready to weld in the outer rocker. I am now gonna mask off where, like, obviously like my flange here where I'm gonna plug weld it, but I'm gonna do that all along the bottom here. So I'm gonna mask that and then paint all this in here so it'll have some corrosion resistance. All right, so here it is afterward. All coated up good. I got a towel down there because I went and hosed it all up in here. Get all up in behind. This is what I put on there, some self-etching primer, sim. This stuff works really good for this. All right, so now I'm ready to weld this outer rocker in. See, I got everything trimmed and prepped. Went ahead and did this because this piece here is gonna go in like so, but I have to do that after I put the rocker in because I have to bend the heck out of this to get the lower lip to come up because it's about that far down. Some of these holes aren't even touching this section of the inner rocker, so I'm gonna have to bow it quite a bit. And this is how much I cut down from one of these panels that we got. So, all right, let me get this installed. All right, so you can see I've come in here and plug welded all of this. I wanted to show just how well this panel fits in the front, how it lines up and everything, and especially back here where I have it trimmed. Perfectly flush. See the levels? Identical. I mean, that's awesome. And that wasn't after me, you know, manipulating it a bunch. That was just a couple of taps and there we go. All right, I'm gonna finish welding. I'm gonna weld these down both corners before I bow the bottom up. You can see that massive drop in it here. And like I'd pointed out before, I can bend this sucker way up. It's not even close to touching. So I may go ahead and just weld across here or just tack this across, get this whole upper section locked in, and then bow the bottom. Probably gonna end up taking like a 2x4 on the bottom of the floor jack and then push this up, clamp it, and then start plug welding it. So if you're gonna do one of these outer rockers, this is the kind of stuff that I like to prepare people for. This is after this board with this other 2x4 going across, shoving it up as far as I could, and then hammering the edge to get it up here where it's supposed to be. This one wasn't bad, but you can see the major droop sag in it. I finally got it clamped up there. Let me show you from the inside. All right, so here you can see on the inside what I'm talking about, how far that stinking panel bows down. And this is enough pressure that it's lifting the body off of the dolly right now. So we're gonna have to keep bending and forcing it into place, but just be forewarned, if you have to do one of these, this is the kind of stuff you're gonna have to deal with. Okay, so here it is, all welded up and ground down. Turned out really well. And I also went ahead and put in that panel. It'll just need seam sealer at the very end, but got it plug welded and welded to that tab on there. So the next thing is going to be trying to fit this panel, which I do believe is going to be a bit interesting, because it's kind of running me into that same thing where it's way too long at the bottom. Having to shove it up in there. You can kind of see right here, I'm gonna have to fix this. There's a dent, you can see it, you know, right in here. When I was trying to shove all this up and I was hitting the bottom and stuff, and I had a 2x4 along here and knocking it up, got the end of it a little bit too much and dented it. It's not a big deal. I'll put my Unispotter on here real quick, pop it down, and that'll knock it out. But I will address that before I start welding this panel in, just to relieve any kind of tension there. However, this is just, it's gonna be another fun thing to do. All right, so here's where I'm at now. You can see I've got quite a bit of this overlapped, plenty to roll around. And then back here, this is just rough mock-up. You can see I gave myself extra. This is another reason I cut this panel a little further this way and didn't come over here and use all of this. This contour was a bit different, and the body work on this was real rough. So I wanted to leave this original curve all the same, nothing wrong with this steel, and then just put the patch in. Now here, I've ground a lot of that lip off to get it to contour back to this. And also you can see at the bottom here where I have it lined up and going across. Now, it's just about ready to start welding in. However, this right here is the next dilemma. You can clearly see those curves are not even close. So this one is the factory way. It basically ended right where the heater channel and stuff comes over here. So now I've got this gnarly gap here from here down that I'm gonna have to work in and get this shape. And at the same time, I have this. So this is gonna be interesting, shall we say. All right, so here it is, all welded up, smoothed out. Got the seam, or the lip all rolled over and pinched tight, welded the bottom, just like they'd done from the factory, just a little bit at the top. Everything plug welded under here. I was able to pull this together real nice. So now I just need to come back. You can see that dent that was there before. And there's a couple of pits in here, these ones. I need to go and weld those up real quick, and then grind those down, put my patch in, slick that off, make it like this, and be on to the back. All right, so as you can see, I've welded this all in. I just kind of skipped over that, just came in here and knocked it out. Not a big deal. I'd already showed where I'd done it all and then just, you know, welded it in. So anyway, it's all lined up here. This piece goes and tucks in behind. Now, I want to point out this curve right here. This I just cut out of the aftermarket panel. It does not have that indentation in it up here. So what I'm gonna have to do now is I'm gonna have to come up in here and go right in between and around, and then cut that out and get rid of all this rot. All right, so I've started on this lower quarter section here. One thing I wanted to point out on top of I think I've already kind of gone over the stamping defects and stuff. However, check this, where this edge, look at that bulge. Try to get it to focus, but I know you can still see it. That major crown right there, where it meets up here, and it's supposed to be flush across. Now, I'll end up grinding most of this outer lip off, but I'm also gonna have to come back and work that back out so that all of this is flat and get rid of all of this crown here. So what I've done on the car, you can see all my crazy tape stuff. Went over here, center of the top trim hole, because these are dimpled. So I could line that up as a reference. And then this, I'm just gonna go a bit above right here. So basically, I have it stepped up here. So I took that up above this so I could mark it. And then here where my angle was, which I'm not to that yet, but this one just giving me reference straight across. So I get everything centered up, line this up the best that I could. So now I'm just gonna start here, cut this across, cut it up, leaving it a little bit big. And then I'll come and start dialing in this rear section, getting all this lined up, because the other issue that I have to be careful about, obviously this stuff has to be exactly where it's supposed to be, but trying to roll it under, basically the same issue like I had with this, I'm gonna repeat the process here. So let me start cutting this up, but I wanted to show you, where I was starting and what my plan was to get it to fit properly. All right, so I know I kind of skipped over getting that in there. I was just kind of getting frustrated with it and just needed to get it done, so I just made it happen. But you can see it's all in there now. Plug welded across the bottom, plug welded in here, and then, fully welded all this, obviously. Turned out pretty good, all things considering. You can see here, I got it back flush. So it's all good. Now, before I get into this disaster back here, I'm gonna flip this thing around and start on the other side. Well, what a process that was, right? But I got it done, and this thing's actually starting to look like a solid car again. Whew. Man, it's been a lot of work getting to this point. It is starting to be more rewarding though, coming out here and going, hey, I got something to actually work with now, and it's shaping up nicely. So, the typical fight to make the stuff work, and I'm on to the other side already, but it's getting there. Slowly but surely, it's getting there. And the back end, that's going to be a whole different ball game there, because of the fact that the car's been hit, kind of kicked this way, twisted, and the decklet doesn't really fit and all that. So once I get this side finished up, hopefully later this week, I will go on to the back. The back I will do a little bit differently than this, where I've done kind of one side and jump to the other side. I'm going to end up having to basically loosen up, cut out what I need to on both sides at the same time, and with that, I'll be able to take the back of the car and really flex it, in all the different directions, so that I can get the trunk lid on there, make it all fit forward, backward, while I have all this rotten mess cut out of my way to really be able to get in there and tweak it easy. And then once I have it all locked in place where the deck lid fits, then I can start welding all the structure back in, and that'll be the quickest, easiest way to get that solved. But once that's done, we are going to be on to primer, bodywork, get this thing painted, and back to the guy that owns it. That'll be awesome. So, if you haven't yet, please subscribe. It's free. It just helps me out. If you hit the like button also, it definitely boosts the video out there so more people can see the content. And drop me a comment. Let me know what you think about how it's going so far. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.